Hello, adventurers. My name's Tyler.
And I'm Richard.
On today's episode, we're talking about Chapter 3 of Daggerheart's core rulebook. Welcome to True Strike.
Howdy, folks, and welcome back to the show.
Hey.
We're moving right along in our chapter march through the core rulebook of Daggerheart.
Yeah.
And we're on Chapter 3, Running an Adventure.
But I don't want to run, Richard. I'm so tired.
You're going to have to. Because you're the de facto game master in most of our games.
Most of our games is true. Actually, we've already kind of discussed this. We're going to do like a mini game soon. And then Richard is going to be running one of the frameworks just after that. And then after that, we're going to do a levels 1 through 10 campaign.
Yeah. So this is your chapter. This is where you shine because, like I said, you're
only
our
for a couple sessions. Then it's
master.
you.
Well, I know. I'm just talking about in the past.
Hey,
you know
what?
In our past.
And like I said last episode, I was so bored through most of this. That's a terrible way to start this. Hi everyone. If you're new to GMing and are new to Daggerheart and stuff, this is an incredibly important chapter of the book for you. They spell out every scenario. Not every scenario you're ever going to run into, but a ton. It's like a very much like scattering on the wall, just, let everything stick that they can. And they take roughly like 60-ish pages and just give you as much GM advice as they can while also telling you how adversaries run and stuff like that and how to handle player choices and blah, 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 blah. And if you already know some of it or you've run games before, a lot of this is going to be stuff that you can kind of not skim over, but just ingest the specific rules to Daggerheart. And then most of the rest, you'll kind of have it's like GM practices and things like that. But if this is your first tabletop RPG, this chapter it's just your home. It's incredibly important. Like you're going to study this and it should have you pretty well prepped for running your first game of Daggerheart and then on to the future.
Yeah. So they started off with just a basic introduction talking about like as a game master, what you're responsible for doing, how you're going to present this game to your players and how you're going to go about creating this world of fiction. And then they kind of cover like there's the 3 core principles, the guidance for the core guidance for GMs, and that's GM principles, GM best practices, and pitfalls to avoid.
Yep.
So these are like the most important kind of like bullet points that aren't specific rules as pertains to actually playing the game. These are just things that you're going to be doing as a game master.
Yeah. They also point out right at the top of this chapter a couple things. One, if your player, no need to read this. If you don't plan on running games, guess what? You're done with the book. GMs, from now on to the end of the book, it's all about you. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's not required reading for the player.
Correct.
I think that if you have this book and you have the time to devote to reading it,
sure,
I would definitely give it a read because it is a really good glimpse into what a lot of GMs already do and what a lot of GMs already know, or what they may not know, and it might give you a lot more insight as a player onto like the kind of behind the scenes of the flow of a game, not necessarily the mechanics of a game.
Yeah. There's also, what's the word? I can't think of the word here either. It helps to have a like vice GM too. Yeah. Like when you're playing a tabletop game and you get bogged down or you forget a rule or anything like that, it's really helpful to have someone else that you can look to in a moment and they're like, oh, it's this, or, oh yeah, no, they have multiple sources of advantage. They actually still get the advantage even though they have the disadvantage. Something like that you might not remember in the middle of the game. So yeah, cool. They also point out that this chapter is much more like discussion based. Like it's not as like, here is fact, here's how game, add this to sheet. It'll mention something and then it'll have a little breakout where it spins it out to you in normal people words.
Yeah, exactly.
And that happens a lot in this chapter.
Yeah, that happens a lot. So yeah, it starts right off the jump with the GM principles, which are broken down into a couple different subsections. The first one is beginning and ending with the fiction. So the fiction is the story that you're creating as a game master with your players, and whatever you have planned for, like your arcs and your general story beats that you want. And it's just really hammering home the idea that everything is about the story, which is why we're all here. The story.
Yep.
The next one is collaborate at all times, especially during conflict. And this, again, is just really highlighting the fact that this is a collaborative effort. It's not just you telling a story to everybody at the table and them listening to your story. It's them evolving that story and changing it and coming up with new story. It's an effort between everybody that's around the table, not just any one person, be it a GM or a player character.
A lot of people coming to Daggerheart are probably fans of Critical Role. It's probably how you heard of this system. The iconic phrase, "How do you want to do this?"
Yes,
is synonymous to this. It's even if it's just that, like, here is the spotlight and the narrative wheel, take it. Let me know what happens, and I'll pick it up halfway through and fill that into the world.
Yeah,
it's like Richard said, you're making this game with your friends.
Yep. The next one is fill the world with life, wonder, and danger. So this is making sure that your world is everything. It needs to feel lived in. So this could be good things. It could be bad things. It could be mysterious things.
It should be.
It should be all of those things. There is a quick mention in this little section about session 0 and safety tools, because when building this, that filling the world with danger and wonder does need to be kind of discussed in safety and stuff like that when you have certain players at your table, because not every table is for every person. So it's a really good idea to have that session 0 and those safety tools to know exactly how much danger is going to be in your world and what types of danger are in your world.
We'll mention it some more later, but it's all about those lines and veils. The lines are things you don't cross, and the veils can exist in the world, but you don't make it up in the forefront.
Yep. The next one is ask questions and incorporate the answers. So this one is a lot of fun, and it is super helpful for game masters because it makes it easier to get your characters into that story. So simply put, asking questions and incorporating the answers could be something like asking questions about a character's backstory or a history with another character. And then when they give you an answer to that, incorporating that answer somehow into the world that you're building. And this could be as simple as, them saying that something happened in a town that was influential to their upbringing, and that town is a real place and a real thing that's going to show up later. Maybe you'll be passing by and you'll have to see somebody in that town, or it could be an influential person that shows up somewhere in the story. So asking those questions, and not just asking them, but using those to incorporate more things into the world to make it more feel lived in and better for your players in general.
You can ask your players where one of them grew up, and then you add that town to the map. You can ask one, you have an established village or area, and ask another player, there's a rumor you've heard about this town. What is that rumor? And you can ask someone else, there's mysterious treasure somewhere on the continent of Barcodia. Where do you think it is? And you could use those little bits and just bloop, bloop, bloop. And then when you get to those moments in your story, your players are going to feel a stronger connection to that because you seeded it right off the jump.
Because it's been seeded. The next one is make every role important. So this kind of goes back to the idea of making roles mean something and not just having inconsequential roles. Like it starts to lose its luster if your player is rolling for every single thing. Like, oh, I want to take a drink of my drink. Okay, make me a roll to see if you can possibly sip that without spilling it on your shirt. Oh, you're going to stand up and go to the bathroom. Make me a roll to see if you fall out of your chair. Or you're walking across the room. There's a marble. Make me a roll to see if you slip on that marble.
How intoxicated is this character, Richard?
There is just, there's a point where you're making rolls for making rolls. And you need to make those rolls have impact. So make your roles count. Make roles important, not just for flippant things that don't need a roll. And use your better judgment for that kind of thing.
Totes.
Play to find out what happens. So this is basically making it where you're having to play the game to see what comes, right? So making something very interesting, making a room full of possible surprises or things that could happen in there, and letting your players play to figure out what's going to happen, like letting the game unfold how it will and letting it become what it is supposed to be.
Yeah. This is wonderful for GMs that are primarily improvisers.
Yes.
Because you're going to spend some time, come up with a general area and vibe setting of what your characters, I think my players are going to do this next session, but they might do this. You kind of like think about it. You have some like mild plans here and there, but you're just be ready for everything to get thrown out the window. And instead of going left, they go right. And then when you're like, all right, well, move what was to the right, from to the left to the right, whatever. It's just, well, now they decided to dig down and you're like, oh, here we go. Yep. And you just roll with that. And there's a lot of fun in that.
Yeah. Which brings us directly into the last one, which is hold on gently. Mm-hmm. And that is more referencing the idea that you don't have to stick to a predetermined fiction in your head 100% all the time. Yes, have your idea of what you think should happen and what you want to happen, but be willing to be malleable with that based on what your characters are doing. It's going to be a lot more fun for them if what they're doing has real world effects. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean throw everything that you've written out the window.
No,
just be prepared to have a little bit of leeway. And like it says, hold on gently. Hold on to your fiction, but be malleable with it. Allow it to go where it is going to go organically via play.
As the GM, you're a player too. In the sense of you are also playing the game, and there's that line you have to walk of you don't want to just tell the players what they do and what happens. But you also don't want them to fully take the reins from you and just tell you that no, you're wrong. This is what happened. You gotta find that balance where everyone just works together and you make this cool story. If you've got an idea for something that was going to happen, a big climactic moment, and they just ignore it and do something else, doesn't mean that moment didn't happen. Mm-hmm. It just progressed without the players sometimes. And then, maybe a day or two later, they find out there's consequences for their lack of actions. And that can be a really cool motivator. So don't give up on your story. Just be willing to, mold and adjust your story and create, a bigger, better story with your buddies.
Yeah.
We move into GM best practices. This is things like cultivating a curious table. This is where you're going to keep things interesting by every now and then. Maybe you'd have a NPC just mutter something under their breath. It's those things that are unexpected. This is an environmental thing, like a slight shaking to the ground beneath their feet. And it stirs the curiosity. And your players don't know immediately what happened. Maybe they need to make a roll or do some sort of investigating through social scenes in town to figure out what's happening. Gain your players' trust. This is things like if you make a promise to your players, you follow through. Don't just outwardly lie to your players. If they earn something, reward them for it. Their time it's extremely valuable. Don't waste their time. Just if you mess something up, if you misspeak, if you got someone's name wrong and it totally threw off like a quest because you named someone incorrectly at the beginning and later you call them by the correct name, just admit you messed it up. Like, oh, I'm so sorry. This is what their actual name is. And they might be like, come on, man. And whatever, it's a game. You're going to mess it up. They're going to mess it up. It's okay. Just be real with each other is a big thing. Like, if you don't give them hard time for like simple mistakes and stuff, they shouldn't, do that to you either as a GM. Keep the story moving forward. When a player makes an action roll, whether it's with hope or with fear, if they fail or succeed, the story should move forward in exciting ways. And don't ask for a roll if it's not necessary. If it's something where they're getting up from their chair, okay, well, why are they, I get up my chair and I go to my room. Yeah, no problem. Is there a NPC or someone that stops them along the way? Maybe that's where they hear the muttering under their breath from the gentleman at the bar with the dark hood and the still full mug of ale, even though they've been there all night, sitting there swirling it, tapping the table with their fingers, and it's getting faster and faster. You can add in little like beats to like interject, and maybe they still just go to their room and then they tell their friends like there's someone downstairs we should be aware of. But you don't roll for that, right? And maybe you make them roll to see if they picked up on what the person was saying, or if they listen in. You give them a little bit and then they can actively listen in to catch more. Just keep things
anything
going
to keep things moving forward.
Cut to the action. This is one of my favorite things, and I'll summarize this with goodbye travel time.
Yeah. Goodbye travel time.
You can run travel if you want. If travel's interesting, run your travel. Otherwise, guess what? We're going from this town to this event or this town over here. Great. You guys hit the road and you start going. After a couple days, you make it to that village. You definitely had some long rest in between there. Wasn't any trouble along the road. Go ahead and reset your stress and health. Hit points and stress if you need to, and if you want to change out any of your domain cards, feel free. Things like that. You don't need to play out long, arduous moments for no reason. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say skip all travel.
No, not
if your players have anything they want to do, or if they want to have conversations on the road, or something's going to happen. But you don't have to
trim the fat. You
don't need to have them roll on travel tables for the fun of it. Mm-hmm. Maybe you do have them roll on it, and if they roll, maybe they roll their hope die and their fear die, and if they roll with fear, maybe you do have something happen. Maybe you gain a fear, and then you describe that as they were leaving town, one of the players turns back and they see a Qatari figure just lurks in the shadows and then turns away, and you just leave it at that. Yeah. And then they get to their next destination, and well, okay, what happened? What was that? Like, you can do some cool things with this as long as you're moving forward and you're cutting the action when it's important. Also, helping the players use the game is the next thing here. They really just point out that if you're the GM, you're probably the person that's read the book the most. You've read the most of the rules. You've read it the most amount of times, unless you're Richard, and then you've read this 15 times, and the guy running the game's read it once. And that's just how it is. And that's why, it's going to be cool when he runs games too, because I'm going to learn and he's going to learn, and we go back and forth, and we do this with each other, and it's a fun time. The podcast helps too, because it's just like really hammers in some of the stuff we learn. And you guys help a lot. Like when Richard gets things wrong.
It happens a lot.
It doesnn't happen a lot. We'll never let it go. But yeah, using this, you're helping people figure out the best way to use the rules to achieve what they are trying to achieve. Especially like, well, I this is the kind of move I want to do, or this is the kind of character I'm trying to build. You just work with your players and like, hey, we can make this happen. Pretty much anything you want to do, we can make happen as long as it's within a very reasonable rule set. So yeah, we got that going on there. There's also, next, we got create a meta conversation, which is as the GM, you should ensure players always feel comfortable shifting in and out of characters. So what we'll do is we'll usually call the person by their real name, right? So I'd be like, Richard, you're not playing Lux in this moment. I would look to you and say, Richard, how do you think Lux would handle this? How do you think Lux would feel? And I want my players to feel comfortable reaching out to me in the same way.
Yeah.
And they just, actually, Tyler, I think I would have gone back and checked to make sure that Bob was still alive before we left camp. And I'd be like, oh yeah, totally, that's fine. Something like, just, it's fine to ask these things, or even if it's like hey, I think I would have heard that. And then we kind of have a discussion back and forth. We're like, well, based on how loud the environment was, and you guys were actively passing by in the car, I don't think you would have. But if you want to make a roll for it, and don't ever ask for a roll if they can't. Yeah, pointless rolls, not worth anyone's time. Like you can roll for it, but it's going to be a pretty high skill check. And if they hit it, they hit it. Like, you know what? Good on you. Good on you for asking.
Yeah, but it's always good to have the ability to have a meta conversation.
Yes.
Meta conversations are not innately bad things.
Yes. You don't need your players meta pitching stat blocks and things like that.
No, that's a different conversation.
Guys, I know the weakness of this creature. Yeah. Like, okay, come on.
It's more about just being able to discuss the game outside of just the role play.
Mm-hmm. Next, we have tell them what they would know. This also happens a lot at our tables, and it should happen to everyone's tables. If a character would know something in the world, guess what? Your players aren't going to know all the history of the towns and everything, and arcane study and the best way to repair plate metal and things like that. But their characters probably do.
Yep.
And, just because the character or the player doesn't mean you need to have them roll for it every time either. So if it's something their character would know, You can look over to your player and be like, hey, actually, Jake, your character is well studied on all of this kind of like arcane knowledge. So you would know that Theodore the Great worked on this spell 1,500 years ago. And it's actually the backbone for the type of magic commonly used in this area. And then allow your player to recite that in any way they want. Or if they just say, yeah, what he said, then, whatever.
What he said.
So, yeah, just let the players know when there's something they would know. They don't make them fish for it. Ground the whole world in motive. A lot of this ties into some of the stuff we've already said, but characters should always have motives for doing what they're doing. It doesn't always need to be like I'm just here. It can be as simple as I left my family farm when I was 15 and I just yearned to be an adventurer. It can be that simple. It could be, I spend a lot of time at the bar and I figure it's time I do something with my life. It could be, sure. The deeper the motivations, the better, because then characters can grow and develop. Even if it starts simple, though, they can grow and develop. So don't especially if it's a newer player, don't push them away or force them to really make a deeper backstory, because they're going to develop experiences and moments, core memories as these characters as they play the game. The world is just like players. The world should feel lived in, like Richard said. It should move every day, even when players don't interact with the scene. The scene happens, and it's your job as GM to keep everything in motion and to keep it all aligned as best you can. And if you mess up, that's fine. It's totally okay. Usually your players won't notice.
Yeah,
but
they may not notice.
They may or may not, and you can just do things. And guess what? You can make it super obvious. You if they catch you, you can make it obvious sometimes. And Private Retcon joins the table and he tells everyone the information that you obviously told them 4 sessions ago. Obviously, they just don't remember it. And just keep things going and just be honest and own up your mistakes. Next, we have bring the game's mechanics to life. This is one of those things, like I mentioned in the last episode, where your countdown die could be a long countdown, but it could be an enemy faction that's going to wage war against your allies' faction, and you can see as banners and propaganda from them starts to show up at your doorstep, and you start to see or hear word the villages have been brought down by this faction on the way here, and day after day they are marching their way across the countryside to get to where you're at. And not only are you turning a die over, but just make the world feel that much more lived in every day until they are upon your doorstep. And it's a Lord of the Rings moment where you look upon a great field and there's thousands of enemy troops and you're like, hope we're ready for this. And I'd wage at that point they probably are. Hopefully. Reframe rather than reject. This is going to come up a lot. I'm just going to show you the example right here that they wrote because it's a good one. Well, you might not be able to fly up to the platform using telekinesis spell in your grimoire, but there are plenty of large rocks here you could move around if you wanted. So they could move some rocks to make a stairwell sort of thing. They could potentially, if you allow it, jump on a large rock and levitate the rock to pull you up with it to get to that area. All depends on what your GM is going to allow you to do and what kind of creativity you're working with. Maybe you throw some large rocks into a wall at points where you could kind of use them as steps. There's different ways you could tackle this, but you're just as long as you're not using it for straight up flight.
Yeah, no, I love this one in particular because I really like the idea of reframe rather than reject, because sometimes people or players have an idea of something that they want to do that is within the realm of possibility in their abilities. They just don't see the way that it's possible, and what they're trying to do isn't how it would actually work. And by reframing it, it allows them to see something that they might not have seen before. And maybe their idea is not a great idea on surface level, but in a different light, in a different way, something similar could happen. And just by outright rejecting something instead of reframing it, you're killing possible scenarios or possible narrative moments that could happen that, you might just miss because you just say no to a thing rather than, well, instead of doing that, maybe something like this could work.
Yeah. And you kill your own possibilities.
Yeah, you kill your own
because
possibilities.
anything I allow a player to do, that's free reign for me to do. 100%.
Yeah. Remember the last time you used that rock to levitate yourself over the ledge? So you see that big orc over there? He's riding a rock across the battlefield right now at 50 miles per hour. And he's got his shield up and his sword out. What do you do?
This is the coolest scenario.
You're all like, I take it back. I didn't want to get over the wall that bad.
I said 50 miles an hour. He's already here.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you said,
that's so
it
funny.
works for you too.
Yeah. Also, you don't want to take away from other characters' abilities. So if you, because of my ancestry, I have flight. So I can fly, or an ability from a specific class I chose that gives me flight. And I can only do it this many times a day or something, or cool, great, wonderful. And the wizard's just like, I just telekinesis my boots. And
easy.
I just fly anywhere I want. And you're like, well, maybe a little more than just make yourself fly. I'm not going to take it away, but let's see what we can work with. So that's another cool one here. They also have Workin Moments and montages. This is kind of the cutting to the action, right?
Yeah, kind of the same thing as
this
cutting
is
to the action.
This is the sometimes you can zoom in and out of a scenario or this is actually the best way I think to put this. It's just what it is. The montage in your favorite TV show or movie.
Yep.
And you were just zooming in and out, passing through different moments of time that have taken place from A to B. And you can even ask your players, like, well, what did you do at this moment? Or what did you do here? Or what did you do here? And you just kind of paint like a word picture that, spans the course of hours, maybe even days or weeks.
Yeah, depending on what it might be.
Exactly. If your group's big thing they saved up all these chests of gold and they want to, open up a shop, their own little safe haven. Maybe you don't role play through
inventory
and every day of this happening and hiring the contractors and dealing with replacing the contractors when the first ones didn't show up, and when they did show up it was a terrible job. You just kind of skip some of that. I mean, you can flash forward through some of those bits.
Make it a montage.
Yeah, make a little montage. It's a little fun. Next, we got pitfalls to avoid. The things they list here are undermining the heroes, always telling the players what to roll, letting scenes drag, singular solutions, overplanning, and hoarding fear. Undermining the heroes specifically being that you don't... It's the kind of we mentioned, like when the player rolls with fear, or they fail or something like that. You don't want to make them feel bad.
Yeah.
You should go out of your way to just show how the story progresses and how they are heroes of this story. And sometimes heroes mess up, or something just goes wrong. You can't prepare and plan for every single scenario. And like we always say, failing is exciting.
Yeah,
because it just it interjects new life into a beat.
Yeah, and it's about also making your character be able to fail a roll without just saying they're bad at thing.
Yeah,
right. Without just completely undermining them completely. Unless there's a blurb in here too where it talks about particularly comical games. So if you're playing a super lighthearted game and you're okay, I want to read this book, Richard, and I say, okay, well it's an ancient arcane script, so make me a roll, and then you roll and you fail that, and I'm like, well, you're functionally illiterate. So you can't read anything, which is fine in a comical game, like we're playing One More Quest.
Comical game, or you're just that kind of table, and your friends are used to this kind of but you all rag on each other.
Yeah, if it's not that kind, if it's a more serious, if we're in Age of Umbra, I'm not going to say that to you. We're just going to come up with a different way to fail at that. Not that you're illiterate, just maybe as you read these words, they start to confuse you. Your brain starts to get foggy, and the letters seem to jumble themselves
up. You
up.
and I are on the same exact wavelength.
Yeah, there's something here that's keeping you from understanding this. That's a way to fail reading something without saying you can't read.
Yeah, exactly. Next here we got always telling the players what to roll. This is things like Richard, make me agility roll. And you're like, oh, actually, I really think presence would work more in this situation because I'm not trying to get away from the scenario. I'm trying to confuse and distract the adversary or the NPC. And I'm like, no, I asked for an agility roll. You're running from this. No, don't do that. Stop. Bad GM. Just work with your players.
Yeah, work with your players.
If a player
collaborative storytelling.
Ask you if they can roll a certain thing. Hear them out.
Yeah, hear them out.
If
Don't
it
automatically say no.
absolutely makes no sense, have a discussion. If it makes a semblance of sense, just let them have it.
Yeah.
Just fine. You know what? They're probably going to want to roll something because it gives them a better modifier. That's okay. Let your players feel strong.
Yeah.
They're good at things. If they're good at presence and not agility, they built their character to be good at talking themselves out of situations. Let them be their character. Let them play out the moments. Letting scenes drag. This is one I still work on to this day because sometimes it feels hard to know when to exit a scene or when to force a narrative shift, because sometimes players even will get like stuck in a scenario where they feel like they're kind of just spinning in a circle.
Yep.
And it's you want to, as a GM, give them a moment to they're spinning tires and you want to give them a moment to catch traction. And if they do, it's going to be a really cool thing, right? They're going to feel good and you're going to feel good and the story's going to go the way you expect it to go. And it's just knowing that balance of when to pull the plug is hard. So I don't actually know the right answer here.
Yeah.
They do give advice.
They give you advice here, and it's something that every GM has run into in one way or another, and that could be, like you said, in a narrative scenario, knowing when to exit a scene or like when to stop a scene, and it could be something even in combat. This is something that I've run into running games before, where, you know, like you have it happened in a live play that's on this channel. You can go back and listen to it. Playing Mork Borg with you, and you're fighting a goblin, and we both were rolling the exact same things. And it was literally one turn I roll, oh, I miss. You roll, you miss. I roll, I miss. You roll, you miss. I roll, I miss. That was horrible GMing on my part. At one point, I should have been all like, the goblin is starting to get exhausted. He's starting to cry. He gives up. He drops his sword and his shield.
This would have been amazing.
It would have been great, yeah. But I got stuck in this loop of these are the rules.
Yes.
And the rules say I have to roll, and when I fail, it's your turn. And then when you fail, you roll. I'm sticking to the rules, and that was not the smart way to do it. The smart way to do it would have been knowing that after the third time or the second time we both failed, something needed to change.
Sure.
And this is a lot easier in a game like Daggerheart because you have things like your fear dice.
Bingo.
You gain that fear. You can use that fear to then dramatically shift things and end the drag, because you're either ending the scene or you're making the scene dynamic again, and it's going to not drag anymore.
Yep. In Daggerheart, you could have a giant direwolf come from the shadows and eat the goblin, run off into the woods. And then now you've done two things. One, you've ended that combat. And two, you've introduced a new threat. And do they go after the direwolf? Do they try to avoid the direwolf? What do you do? And one of the cool things, this isn't part of the GM thing, but like attacks of opportunity from other games is not a global ability in this game. So it wouldn't even be a thing. Well, I get an attack of opportunity. No, it just grabs the goblin and is gone. Like, you've ended that scene. The scene has moved on. Now sit back and see what how your players react.
Yeah.
So, yep. We also have singular solutions. This we mentioned earlier. You've got your plan. This is how things are going to go. This is how you solve it. That's silly. I understand if it's a puzzle, right? And this is the answer to the puzzle. If your players come up with a clever way to get around the puzzle, guess what? Your players got around the puzzle. That's okay. That's fun. I didn't expect that. Like, okay, sweet, you did it. And even if you in your mind have a singular solution going into a game, into a session for a scenario you're going to put before your players, be ready for them to just completely circumvent it, and don't punish them for it.
Yeah.
Over planning. Hey, remember how I was just talking about, whatever? Don't do that. If you want to spend 3 days prepping for your very first session of Daggerheart ever, and you think it's, hopefully I have enough, and then you come to find out you have 5 sessions worth of stuff planned, that's okay. The more you run games, you're going to figure out your style and learning like how much you need to plan ahead, and how far in advance you need, to give yourself time to do it. Is it 5 minutes before everyone shows up? Is it day before, weeks before?
Yeah.
Everyone's going to be different in that sense. But don't plan so far ahead that you're distraught or upset when things don't go the way you expected, and now you feel like you've wasted time. You don't want to end up in that situation. Hoarding fear. We mentioned this last episode.
Yep.
You can have a max of 12. Guess what? Unless you're building up to a climactic moment, you probably don't need 12. You can interject fear here and there. Keep your players on their toes. You can do, there's a couple methods they mention here. One, I forget what it's like, waterfall moment or something, but you can like really go after your party, your players at the beginning of a combat and spend a ton of fear and have like every adversary take a turn. So they're just like really on the back foot. And then as you're naturally running out of fear, your players are going to feel powerful because they're stepping in and they're going to start taking out your adversaries one after another. And you're still going to get a steady trickle of fear from them here and there. And then you get your free GM moves from when they fail or, roll of fear. And as long as you're not just sitting on it.
Yeah.
If you're sitting on 12, then combat is going to feel very one-sided, the players against you.
Yeah, it's going to not feel balanced.
Right. And then the game is balanced for the players with their stat blocks and them using hope to augment things in their favor. And you're supposed to use fear to augment things in your favor. And if you're not doing that, then the stakes aren't going to feel as high and the combats won't be as interesting. So do what you got.
Use it or lose it.
Exactly.
The next thing we have is core GM mechanics.
Well,
not lose it.
At the end of your session, any fear you have does roll over. So you don't lose it.
You're not losing it.
You don't gain extra.
But you're not gaining extra. Yeah. But yeah, next thing we have is core GM mechanics. So we've already touched a little bit on GM's die. So this really showcases the fact that you're not using duality dice.
Sad.
As a GM, you are using a D20.
For reasons.
I get it. And it works really well. I think the system is fine.
Higher variability.
Yep. So as a GM, you're making your rolls using that D20. But a lot of the still stuff is applying. You're not rolling with hope. You're not rolling with fear or anything like that. But this is the more traditional D20 method that you're used to seeing in most games that use D20s. So you're calculating your attack roll, which is just your D20, and then your adversary's attack bonuses like you normally would. You're using that to determine whether or not the attack hits against the player's evasion. And on the hit, you're rolling for damage like you would normally. You do have critical successes on this one, so your 20s are still your criticals, which they took away for a while there, but then they put back in, right?
Thank God.
Yeah. So
it was part of the beta stuff. I get it. I
stuff.
Absolutely get it. When you're going to test an idea, do it in a beta.
Yeah, exactly. Have it there. The next section for this one is calling for action rolls. So this one is basically what you're going to ask your players to roll. So the first one here is making sure that you have options for your players. So it's not necessarily always just calling for an action roll and then having it be a thing. So the first thing that they talk about here is maybe you can give them a success with a consequence rather than asking for an action roll. So this could be something as simple as in like you want to try and make a jump as the example that they use here, which means you can give them that jump as a success with no roll. However, it's going to come at a cost, and that cost could be something like somebody seeing you or you making a loud noise to be spotted or something like that.
But it could be a situation where it's an extremely dangerous jump.
Yeah, or it could be
it's very elite, but if they really push themselves to the absolute physical limit, hence the stress, they can make it, and then they don't risk falling
and dying.
So but they might push back and be like, you know what, I don't want to risk this. I want to keep the stress where it is. I don't want to get any more stressed. I need that later.
Yeah, you need that later.
I'm going to roll for it.
You're going to roll for it. Which brings us to the next part, which is establishing the stakes and making sure that the players know what is at stake before they make a specific roll or attempt to make something. Yeah. So like going back to the same example, jumping across a building. If you establish the stakes are, if you miss this jump, you are going to fall and it is going to be extremely painful. Yeah. You might go down. Like this might be enough damage to where you are not going to be getting back up without a scar.
Those people I mentioned that might see you.
Yeah.
They're under you.
They're under you.
So you might hurt somebody.
Yeah. So make sure that your players know the stakes at hand so that they can make a proper decision on what they're going to do.
Not everything has to be a hidden GM secret.
Yeah. And make clear of any guaranteed consequences. Like, so along the same note, make sure that everybody kind of knows what's going on in a roll. So what's at stake, what's guaranteed to happen, what possibly could be the outcomes that you're going to have here.
This could be as simple as, now on the way down, you could try to make, grab some wires or something, try to slow down your fall. But if you roll below a 5, it's going to be enough damage to take you out.
Yeah, exactly. The next section is experiences impact fiction. So this is always looking at like whether or not a roll would be necessary depending upon your PC's history. So like your player characters, what kind of experiences do they have? So think about that before you start to talk about rolls that might happen. Because back to the whole thing is that, like maybe guaranteed success or consequences could definitely be affected by experiences of a character. So who they are, what their background is, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So you want to take all that fiction into account when you're deciding how to use the game mechanics. The next one is making moves. So this just talks a lot about how you're going to make moves and when you're going to make these moves. So, the main example right off the jump is when they roll with fear on an action roll. So that is a given. Like as a GM, your players are making their moves. When they roll with fear, that's your first jump in to where you can make a move. But then you're also gaining fear, right? So then you can, they fail an action roll. You can use that as your GM move. You can immediately follow that up with fear usage to make another move. You could also do it when they fail with something that could have a consequence, or they succeed with something that could have a consequence. So anytime that there's a consequence, it doesn't necessarily just have to be stress. It could be a move on your part. And a good example of that would be like making noise. Like, okay, you're going to try and open this door and you're going to try and do it quietly. You succeed with fear. So now a move for me as a GM might be, well, you didn't open it quietly. It's loud enough. There's a loud creak. You hear somebody down the hall open another door and they're starting to come in.
And they peer out and see you.
And they peer out. And that is a simple move that can be done as a consequence of an action. The other one is they give you a golden opportunity, because sometimes your player characters are going to give you all the opportunities you need to make moves. They just do it. It happens every single session we play D&D. My fellow party members are giving you nothing but ammunition to do whatever they want.
That's the nature of the game.
Like they just, I don't know how many times that I have shot dagger eyes across the table because somebody keeps saying the name Strahd out loud because they have completely forgotten that you aren't supposed to say his name. Their players are going to give you golden opportunities.
It's fine.
It's just what they're going to do.
It's okay. I just know where you are. It's okay. What's the worst I could do with that information?
And then the last one is they look for you as to what happens next. So this is, it's not just all on the players. You as the game master.
You're but a humble deity.
You are the guiding force. Your players are going to be looking at you as far as what are the consequences of my actions?
What happens
What
next?
happens now that I've completed this task?
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? Be prepared for that.
The line there is interesting too, because if you're inexperienced at if you and your entire table are inexperienced at running tabletop games, and you're sitting down with your friends, let's say Daggerheart's your very first one, and you hit that moment, you're going back and forth, you're doing the appropriate thing, and you're setting up scenes, and you're playing them out together, and when something happens cool, you let them elaborate, and they look to you for when the adversaries are doing something. Combat finishes up, and then everyone looks around the table, and then they look at you. You're the person who says something. You can't just be like, okay, well, what happens?
What happens?
Like, they don't know. You're the one running the game. So you tell them.
Yeah. The next section is how to choose a move. And this one is a kind of a broad section here. And this kind of goes back to something that we've already talked about previously, which was when you're dealing with successes and failures. Because you have so many different types of success and failure here. You have success with fear. You have success with hope. You have failure with hope. You have failure with fear. And this is going to be probably the most challenging thing for a lot of game masters.
I entirely agree.
Because this is going to really flex your creative muscle of being able to come up with things that aren't just, okay, you failed, then take a stress. And then there's the obvious ones, like I talk about in here, which is, trying to do something quietly and you fail. The obvious thing is that it's not quiet anymore, right? So that's the obvious thing. And then there's things that are not so obvious, like misspeaking in a social interaction and having that have implications, like as far as, negative consequences about how people view you or what they might go on to tell somebody in another conversation. This is where it gets a little bit harder for a game master because you're going to have to be a little bit creative sometimes.
Yeah. If you are the kind of person who runs games where you roll with, you acknowledge degrees of success, then good.
You're already on the path.
On the right track.
You're on the right track.
This is that, but with like a hard and fast line that like, all right, they succeeded with fear. You have to do something to acknowledge the fear. Yeah. Whether that is something subtle in the background or something not going exactly how they wanted it to, but still acknowledging that they succeeded.
And
it's like, it's definitely, I know for me, it's going to be what takes me the longest to get used to doing fluidly without having to think about it. Because I feel like at first there's going to be moments where you're like, I got a 22 with fear. And I'm like, wow, they only needed a 15. 22 is awesome. And with degrees of success, you're well above. But the fear. And am I even going to like think about that in the moment? And I'm like, oh yeah, no, absolutely. You get 22, you got what you needed. I take a fear token. Oh.
And it's even hard to say, well, you're stressed because you did really good. Why would you be stressed?
Yeah, right. No, it would have to, it would.
Yeah. It's
even though like I lockpicked it, like, yeah, of course. Right. But with fear. And it's like, it's just really, we're going to figure it out.
Yeah, we're going to figure it out. And it goes, the swings, the other ways too. Like if you fail with fear, it's a lot easier to narrate that in a horrible way that goes back to the DC versus succeeding with hope. Because not only are you succeeding, but then you're also succeeding with hope. Yeah, you're getting that extra thing, but do you want to tack anything extra on there? Do they, like if you're succeeding reading something with hope, do you glean any extra information in addition to gaining hope and succeeding? You know what I mean? It'll take some getting used to, and I think it's going to be the hardest thing for most people.
Yeah, I agree.
The next one is avoid undermining success. And this one kind of it ties back into that. So, if you are succeeding at doing something, but you do so with fear, avoid just erasing the success, right? So don't just say, okay, you try to pick a lock, you succeeded with fear, you break it doesn't pick the lock.
Yeah.
And that is a bad way to rule that. Try and come up with a more creative way that doesn't undermine the success, but still hammers home that negative consequence somewhere else necessarily.
The picking lock is a good one because succeeding with fear, especially if you succeed well, it can be as you're in this social gathering, you've made it into this hallway, and you pick this lock, you get into the room, you open it, it's nice and quiet, but when you do, there's a guard you didn't expect to be there, but he's looking the other direction.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Now what do you do?
Right.
Or it could be as simple as in, okay, you have succeeded at picking this lock with fear. As you turn that last tumbler, your lockpick breaks off. You no longer have a lockpicking kit.
Oh, this is funky.
Right?
This is so hard, though. The degrees of success.
The degrees of success.
Whew.
And you have to think about how that affects the character, because you don't want to undermine the success, which you're not doing, but then you also have to think about the greater implications of it. So again, it ties back into that thing. It's going to be an adjustment for a lot of people.
This is one of those ones where I'm like, all right, you need like a 12 to succeed, right? They get a 12 on the fear die and they get a 1 on the hope die. That lockpick's broken.
Yeah.
Right? So I am gonna. I think that's what's gonna help me the most is not only what did you succeed with, but just seeing exactly where the dice landed.
Yeah. The last part of here is softer and harder moves. And basically what this is
not what you're thinking.
Oh, no, stop.
It's a family show.
When they turn to you, you have options for how you want to respond. And it's basically whether or not it's going to be harsh or if the tone, basically, of how you're going to be making your moves. Are they going to be softer tones or are they going to be harder tones?
This is Daddy DM.
Yeah.
Like stepping up. He's upset.
How had a harsh are you going to be? Yeah.
Other than like, oh, hey, little boy, and pick you up and give you a nice little hug. That's okay. I know you didn't mean to break it.
You want to go over some example moves?
Yeah, I'd love to. Here we got some example GM moves. Buckle up.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah. Here's some GM moves you might want to try. And I'll try to keep them all short. Show how the world reacts. You can use basically, if depending on whether a PC succeeds or fails, just narrate what the world does. Does the lockpick break? And as in you fail with fear, the lockpick breaks. You turn around and that noise was just enough that the guards down the hall turn and see you blow their whistle, and now there's reinforcements coming. It could be something like you go to jump over the roof, you fail, you fall into a crowd, you don't take you don't go unconscious, you don't take enough damage, but you take out some NPCs on the way down, and there are just people shocked in horror.
Yeah,
and your party on the other roof is just looking down at you.
Yeah, and everybody screams
like, my apples. Like, ah! Yeah, it's awful. It's terrible. You can also ask a question, build on the answer. That is a really simple one. It's one you're gonna be doing all the time. Perhaps they succeed or fail, and you're just gonna be like, okay, when you land on this apple vendor, what's the first thing going through your head? What do you think you would do? What do you think the people around you they'd react? And you try to put that in your player's lap and see how, it gets their gears. They're not just listening. They're an active participant once again, and even what's happening in the world. It's fun to throw that at your players every now and then. You can make an NPC act in accordance with their motive. If basically this is you're sneaking into a room with Chadberry, the locksmith's apprentice, and he's just learning from you, and he's like, well, man, you're a real good little guy. I gotta get in there and save my locksmith daddy. And then you get it open, and he rushes past you, and he runs into the room, not looking to see, that could be with fear. Rushes past you, doesn't look to see if there's, the room's clear. And when he gets about halfway in, he realizes that there was an alarm system, an arcane ward on the floor. And that sounds start going off. Lean on the character's goals to drive them into action. This is just as simple as looking at your motives of your PCs, their experiences even, and press those points a little bit. Put the thumb on that scale a minute and see if it pushes your players, gives them drive to pursue, an enemy, perhaps. Maybe the goblin that was taken by that direwolf had your wallet. You really want that money, your MasterCard's in there. You got to get it back. Signal an imminent off-screen threat. Hey, the wolf is going to eat your money. It is slowly digesting your cash.
You got nothing.
Or it could be the enemy faction is going to be at your doorstep any day now. Reveal an unwelcome truth or unexpected danger. This is always a cool one because this is the Qatari you didn't see until you were just leaving the village. This is the vampire that you've heard about, but you didn't think was anywhere near. You haven't fought this guy. You haven't met him before. You've heard of him. Well, he's here now. What do you do? you describe this character ending the scene, and if you've built them up enough, maybe your PCs know better than to engage, and then just we'll see how the moment plays out as it instantly switches from a combat to a social situation. And a social situation can be just as deadly if played incorrectly. But let the dice roll, my friends. You can force the group to split up. Like I mentioned last episode, this could be having a cave-in, having a bridge collapse. This could be having a large troll who just flew in on a 50-mile-per-hour boulder, lands between your party, and just with his mass, like, separates your party from one side to the other. And then, different groups of enemies kind of get between you and make it to where it's hard to work together. You also have another suggestion is making a PC mark stress as a consequence for their actions. We've mentioned this numerous times already. Making a move the characters don't see. This is just using your fear to make something happen in the background.
Yep.
And this is super cool in social situations, of course, but you just burn a fear. You let your players know. You're like, I'm going to go ahead and use a fear to make an action, make a move. And they're like, well, what happened? And they're like,
we'll see.
We'll see. You didn't catch it. You weren't around for it. Oh, that's a good one. If your players like didn't go to something, like you weren't around
for that.
You can show the collateral damage. This is if there's the players try to do something powerful and it doesn't work out. If they try to leap a building and they don't use the stress, they just try to roll for it and people get hurt. You can show that sometimes consequences affect the world.
Guess what? No more apples.
Yeah, apples are gone. You've got to go to the next town over.
He was the only guy.
And guess what? The apple vendor the town next door, he's heard about what you did.
And he's tripled his prices.
Refuses to sell you apples for anything less than 3 handfuls of gold.
Yes.
You can clear a temporary condition or effect. Easy peasy. You're going to use a fear. Clear your vulnerable state or whatever the effect is you have on you. You can shift the environment. Have the environment use a environment ability, which a lot of environments do. It could be lightning coming down. It could be a tree falling, separating the party. It could be all kind. Lightning strikes the tree, catches fire, and it falls perfectly between, separating 2 of you on each side. What do you want to do? It could be in the middle of a combat. It could be, before a combat. And then, party has to go different directions and potentially run into different things, reuniting at some point. Who knows? You can spotlight an adversary. The simplest, cleanest of all of them.
Easiest.
You're just picking an adversary and having them do a move. You can capture someone or something important. This is going to be... you can try to knock the weapon out of a PC's hand, and now they've got to spend, part of their turn going and grabbing it. This is grabbing an NPC or something. Mm-hmm. It's just move the scene, right? It doesn't always have to be attack.
No.
There's more you can do. This is the imagination game. Use a PC's backstory against them. You can use this to bring up, different traumatic moments, or you can have Barry Buckler, the pirate lord of which you escaped his crew after you had been tied up in the brig for months, and you took a moment of sincerity and weakness from him, and you made your escape. And when you did, right before you left off the ship, you set off a powder keg, sending him and his crew to the depths below. But little did you know, he escaped alive, and he's been searching for you ever since. And good swimmer was the experience that led to this moment. So be careful with your experiences, y'all. Take away an opportunity permanently. Remember those lockpicks? They broke.
Yeah. Cut off a pathway.
Yeah. You just take something and get rid of it. If it's something the players were maybe after, or an NPC or someone they cared about, it's an NPC, a shopkeep, someone that they've grown attached to over time. Maybe you're 12 sessions in, they've got a favorite NPC, and you just lay them down.
Yeah, don't be afraid of opportunities lost.
Yes,
because sometimes they help narrative.
Mm-hmm. You want to take over fear?
Yeah, the next section we have here is fear and basically how to use it and what it is. So the first thing here, they talk about how you're gaining fear, which we've already gone over numerous times. So they just reiterate you're gaining fear when, your PCs are rolling with fear. They talk about how you're tracking your fear. You can use this as tokens. You can have little hangers that go on your DM screen. They could be little printed daggers like I did. So just tracking it.
Have you figured out where you're going to put those in yet?
No, I don't know
like
yet.
A D12 or something.
I think so. They do talk about here on how when the session ends, you have to know how much fear you have because it is going to be carried over. So keep that in mind.
It's got to be a heart.
The next thing is spending of fear. So this talks about the different things you can do with your fear, which we've talked about a couple of these, but we'll go through them real quick. So interrupting players to make a move. So you can use your fear to move out of turn. So normal turn order. You can
it would normally be them again, but you're nope.
You're interrupting. You can make additional GM moves. So this isn't necessarily, like making like anything like an adversary move. This is like making a completely different GM move along the lines of the stuff that we just discussed. Everything from spotlighting to, like making a MacGuffin move or cutting off a pathway or something like that. You can also use an adversary's feature. So this is fear features that adversaries may have. So sometimes you have a stat block on an enemy that has a feature that is only activated by spending of fear. And it could be 1 fear, 2 fear, 3 fear, depending on how bad of an ability it is.
Yeah.
Bad for the players, not for you. So you could spend that fear to activate those abilities.
Like spend 2 fear to bring up a psychic connection between you and the PC, pulls to light their most painful memories. Roll 2d20 for damage.
Yeah, or it could be something as simple as in spend a fear to activate a breath weapon. There's also environmental features. So sometimes environments, which we'll get into later on in the book, which are very cool. So these are environments that you can either use directly from the book or use bits and pieces of to make your own environments that have different features that you can activate, and you use fear to do so. This could be something like, for example, living vines that come up out of the ground and entangle, opponents that are trying to walk through it or something like that. You can also add an adversary's experience to a roll. So if you have, your pirate guy who's really good at swimming, and you decide to add his swimming to his roll to see if he escapes the fiery inferno, which you almost doomed him to. So those are some examples of things that you can do with fear. After that, they move into basically the question of how much fear should you spend in a scene? Because this isn't just, there's no hard and fast rules about
Absolutely
this.
not.
So like you said in the last episode, you might want to hoard fear to a point, to make a big impactful move for later on in the fight. Or you want to spend it all up in the front of the fight so that you can, then just kind of trickle it back in throughout. So they give you some guidelines here for different types of scenes, everything from incidental to minor, standard, major, and cinematic, and different amounts of fear that you would spend in those moments to kind of dictate how intense the scene is going to be.
Yeah.
And again, these are all just suggestions. Up to you at the end of the day how you want a scene to play out and how you want to actively use your fear. And then they talk again about like, what do I do with all this fear? And they kind of just go through the normal thing, like, make sure, you're doing things with it. Acting first is a good one, like jumping in and being the first one to act in a combat because you have a lot of extra fear.
Yeah.
Put your players off footing just by moving first, making sure that you're getting the jump on them. Spending consistently, so not hoarding it if you don't need to. Making sure that you're using it consistently so that you're providing the challenge that your players need. There could be coming out strong, so you might choose to, spend a lot just to make sure that, one adversary is basically being spotlight. He is the big bad and he is coming out of the gates swinging, and it's going to be a big fight and it's going to be a good fight.
Yeah. Yep.
And then there's drawing blood. Every time an adversary misses, you might want to spend fear to, make sure that they do hit, like they successfully strike. So it's a good thing to occasionally just make sure that your PCs know that not everything is inconsequential, that a fight is going to be a fight.
Yeah. So if one guy comes in and he misses, you have someone else come over, they take a swing, and someone else come over, they take a swing. because you're not going to be spotlighting the same guy multiple times in your turn.
Multiple times.
But
and then the next part is, and the last part is improvising fear moves. And again, this goes back to the whole game of being able to be flexible and improvise where you need to. And this means that you can come up with ways to use fear that aren't hard and fast rules in this book.
I love this section.
And there's some really cool examples in here. They actually go through 4 examples in here of different things that you could do, for everything from introducing a new adversary to the scene, or like activating like a powerful transformation in an NPC to boost their capabilities. So like you've done this in regular Dungeons and Dragons, you know what I mean? Like we had a combat which was supposed to be just between humans, no transforming allowed, and then in the middle of the combat, he broke the rules and he's transforming. You gotta
do what you gotta do,
and it changes the whole dynamic of the scene. And this is a really good improvisational use of fear to, again, this helps with that whole letting a scene drag thing. Doing stuff like this is a way to break out something that either is, mundane or getting boring, or could be getting boring.
This is every episode of Power Rangers. Must grow.
Yeah.
I love it. But I like that they just break out and, make the examples are like, pretty wordy. They really like run you through some, the point they're trying to get across. And they're just like, hey, you know what? Just because the fear move isn't on the page, just because it's not on the stat block, doesn't mean you can't do something that you think is reasonable. Mm-hmm. And as long as you are spending an amount of fear that should equal an ability like you were, proposing, go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Look at the, what's on the stat block as guidelines. We have setting your roll difficulty, which is, they set it up in increments of 5, where a 5 is very easy, all the way up to a 30, which is nearly impossible. Mm-hmm. They also tell you, hey, it doesn't have to be in increments of 5. It could be a 12.
This is all just suggestions.
Yes, a lot of this whole chapter is advice more than hard and fast rules, outside of a couple things here and there. Degrees of success and failure. We've mentioned this. This is just hammering home that, if someone just misses something, maybe narrate it to where they were this close. And if they like really succeed, like, let them own that moment at how dang good they are at picking locks. They are like, they snuck around back and picked this without a single soul knowing, like a whisper in the night, a shadow on the floor, just none the wiser, to what they've done on this night. Yeah. Difficulty rolls. This is this is PCs rolling against adversaries. This is just what you need to hit them, or skill checks or things like that. I was going to say if you've been playing tabletop, but if you haven't, hey, a lot of your adversaries are, you're going to need a 15 to hit them, and you're going to roll your duality dice, and you hit a 15 between both, you hit. Or if they have you making a reaction roll against different kinds of abilities they have, this is the roll you're getting, the number you're trying to hit, essentially. We also have examples of these kind of things. So let's look at agility, right? Let's just look at this one. Difficulty, I'll split it in the middle. Let's say a difficulty 15, right? A 15 sprint might be that if you get a 15 on sprinting, you sprint within close range across rough terrain with an enemy present. It's something you could achieve with a 15. But if you got a 30, you could sprint across the heads of your enemies into a pitched battle. So if that's what you were trying to achieve, you'd need a 30. But if you're trying to achieve sprinting within close range across an open field with an enemy present, you just need a 5. You can make that happen. So it's I like that they throw this into. It's just a table. That's what I'm looking for, and with different examples for 3 examples for each of the different traits. And here's another good one. If you want to walk, this is another agility one. If you want to walk slowly across a narrow beam, you need a 5. But if you want to run across an inch-wide oiled slick beam in an active rainstorm, you need a 30.
It's the extremes. Yeah.
It's in everything in between, and you just use this information to help decide your own, difficulty rolls, because you're gonna be coming up with these on the fly 90% of the time.
So this is just a good kind of basic, kind of with an idea of how tough you want to make a specific thing.
Mm-hmm. Gaining or giving advantage and disadvantage, like we've mentioned before, in multiple sources, etc., etc. Just think of if an NPC or an environmental can't think of what I'm looking for. Something in the environment is happening that would aid your players. Then maybe they have advantage on this, and they're going to roll that extra d6. But maybe it's pouring rain. Maybe the NPC that they're with is like struggling to get past them because they're just upset, and you're trying to hold them back while also, strike at somebody. Maybe that's disadvantage because their attention is split between two different things at the same time. So you can, adjust whether you're giving advantage, disadvantage based on that. They also bring up advantage and, disadvantage versus difficulty. And you could be like, oh, instead of advantage, I'm going to lower the difficulty. Because at the end of the day, it's still just easier. But because of the swingy nature of advantage, sometimes advantage is just more clear, and it makes you consistent, right? So if you're in a situation where, like, you've got an NPC who is helping you lift something, right? Yeah. Well, instead of it being a 10 to lift it instead of a 15, let it be with advantage, because how well is the NPC going to lift? They're going to throw in that D6, and that's going to give a little bit swingy nature. If they roll a 1, maybe you're doing most of the legwork. Yeah. But if they roll a 6, they brought their A game, and maybe that helps you clear that 15 instead of just making it easier. Adversary rolls. This is all of your adversaries on your GM moves or in social situations doing their rolls. Like I said, you're going to be doing D20s for all these. If you're doing an attack roll, you're going to choose your dice, which is going to be your D20. If it's advantage, disadvantage, it's either it's always going to be a second D20, but advantage, you're always going to pick the higher number. Disadvantage, you're always going to pick the lower number.
Yeah.
You're going to find the attack modifier. So on your adversaries, stat blocks and stuff, you're going to see modifier. If it's a +2 to agility and it's agility-based weapon or finesse or whatever, you're going to add that in there. Then you're going to roll the dice. You're going to subtract or add whatever the modifier was, and then you're going to resolve it. If they hit, if they missed, either way, you're going to narrate with the player. Sometimes, especially if you miss, I go to swing, this large winged beast flies in out of nowhere, and it just misses you, Richard. How's it? Do you see it coming? What happens?
Yeah.
And you can kind of feed into it a little bit and be like, yeah, I noticed it the last second, and I dodged just a little bit. And just enough, I miss you by 1, and it takes off some hairs with its sharp, razor sharp talons as it flies over. You've also got a bit here for attacking multiple targets, and it breaks out that by default, an adversary can only hit one target with a standard attack. Now, they might have a special action that allows them to hit multiple targets, and if that is the case, they roll once, and that roll is the number used to see if it hits the multiple targets or not. So if it's going after evasion, for example, and you and 2 of your allies are near each other, and maybe the attack only hits one of you, maybe it hits all 3, but it's just that one roll. I'm not rolling per. And I like this because 1, it's the one attack most of the time, and 2, it really helps to speed up combat, which is what everything's about, being streamlined. Yeah. And I've said it, and I'll say it a million times. Daggerheart feels like a tabletop game made by people who play tabletop
games. Yep.
So I appreciate this as well. Attack rolls as story. This is the thing of if I'm hitting you, right? You're telling me, I'm going to use some armor slots. Okay, well, am I shredding up my talons? Am I digging into your armor and I'm tearing away bits of metal as you're slowly losing those armor slots? Did I take off 3 hit points with a severe attack? What does that look like? Did you take stress? What you drop down to your knees and your world starts to feel like it's spinning because you just can't handle what's happening right now. Two of your friends have already gone down and you think you might be next. You can really just build out this story with your players, as always, through an attack. That could just be a talent attack. And hey, you know what? Build it out a bit. Yeah. If you've done that thing where, hey, this combat's going on a little bit, don't be afraid to like, yeah, no, this definitely hits. What do you do? That's fine every now and then, of course. But these like quicker combats, and especially like as moments are happening, do what you can, especially with your players, to just build out as cinematic of a moment as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes that's as easy as like just saying, okay, well, what does that look like?
Exactly. Paint me a word picture.
Yeah.
Yep. Adversary reaction rolls. So like we've mentioned, with PCs, you just roll the duality dice. You're not adding in certain things or whatever. But the adversaries, you're going to roll in you're going to roll your D20, see if you succeed or fail. But an adversary can add relevant experiences as a bonus to their roll.
Yeah.
That is the difference really between them and the PCs, is adversaries can add experiences. So what? You're going to use a fear to do so.
Yeah.
So that's your call. Example they threw in here. Rune is chasing a masked thief and unleashes the fireball spell to slow them down. The masked thief has a very relevant experience of acrobatics +3. So the GM spins a fear and adds a +3 to the experience to the reaction roll. Cool.
Yep. Makes sense.
Easy peasy. Another way for your GM to use fear. Which it's funny because it's great for everyone, right? Because it reminds me of like if you bring it to D&D, it's like legendary actions and resistances and stuff like that. Legendary resistance is a big one. If I cast a big spell in it, the GM uses the legendary resistance. Crap, that would have hit them, but it didn't because they used a resistance. On the flip side, that's one less resistance.
It's one less resistance that you're worrying about right now.
So maybe they didn't take full damage in that fireball. So they're down a fear. Which, in this game,
is big.
Yeah, because that fear could have been an entire attack at you. It could have been your party being split up. It could have been your favorite NPC being murdered on the streets. So, hey, you know what? If they took half damage on your fireball, so be it. GM. Ugh, my brain is on GM. Class hope features. There we go. I even highlighted it.
Yeah.
Like, literally.
Oh, it's highlighted.
I don't know why. Each class has a hope feature that requires 3 hope to use. Whenever a PC uses this unique and powerful feature, ensure that impacts the scene. This I highlighted because of that exact moment. It's a moment. If you're much like you burning a ton of fear, if your players are burning half of their total possible stored
3 hope. Yeah.
It's not just cool, you do that thing. How did they do that thing? They spent 3 hope and they repaired 2 armor. How did you do that in the middle of this battle? Quickly repair. Are you actively like taking like plate and like sliding in new plates and out old ones? Are you taking the metal that's there and using your just insane grip strength and just stretching it over like the gaping holes? Like, what are you doing? Are you just like summoning new metal snakes to your armor from the woodland around you? And like, I don't know, man, can tell me something. Like, either way, like, give your players the space to
make it an epic moment.
Exactly. You want to take countdowns?
Yeah, so countdowns is next. We talked about countdowns a little bit. There are different types of countdowns, but generally speaking, they're all very similar, using countdown dice. So it's coming up with how long you want your actual countdown to be, and then figuring out how it's going to work, right? Because you have standard countdowns and you have dynamic countdowns. And standard countdowns could be things like that just happen on a rest. So every time you rest, the countdown moves.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be something as simple as in, like waiting for a date to come. Like you said in our Curse of Strahd, we have an event to go to, and we have so many days before that event happens. So a countdown could be as simple as in, there are 7 days in the week. We are on the first day, and your countdown die goes to 7, and every day it goes down 1.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you could have a more dynamic countdown that has different things that happen. Sometimes it could be consequences. So that countdown could be based on political events that are happening in the world that's around you. And if a missive gets through the front lines, that countdown could escalate 3 times.
Yeah.
Instead of just 1 in a normal day, because something, drastic has changed in there. So this section covers a lot of different ways to essentially utilize these countdowns to make the actual world feel lived in and give your players a sense of urgency of things that are going to happen. Countdowns could also be not even necessarily for that, but they could be for projects. So countdowns can also be used for, like creating something at camp. Like if you're working on making new armor or working on a new spell or something like that, or working on solving a puzzle. And then they go over some rules for countdown advancement that you could use. So like you could have something like dice rolls affecting countdowns. So things like rolling with fear could make a countdown kick 3 times. Rolling with hope, failure with hope could make it tick down 2 times instead. So they go through a bunch of different ways that you can use countdowns. They also talk about randomizing starting values for specific countdowns. So if you're not sure exactly what you want a countdown to be, you could randomize it, which means you could just roll a d6 and have that countdown start at 6 rather than just coming up with an arbitrary number. Mm-hmm. There's also looping countdowns, so things that might trigger multiple times. So you have a countdown that is a 4 tick that happens every time your character rolls with fear. And once those 4 ticks happen, an event happens. It could be a new player enters the battlefield, or the adversary uses a special ability.
Yeah.
And that could be an ability that they can use again in 4 more ticks.
This large metal like boar just is expelling this toxic gas, and every 4 ticks,
every 4
another
ticks,
bout
more
of fumes
stuff comes out. Yeah.
Yep.
And then that loop just keeps happening. And then they also talk about how you can use countdowns in chases, which is a lot of fun. So they go through, and they even give a good example on here about basically making a chase a more interactive thing and a more active thing when you have countdowns in play, which I like all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Long-term countdowns is more along the lines of kind of what we talked about with like the political stuff, and when you talk about things like the Strahd a week away from being at a party, whatever it may be. So these are countdowns that could be very long. They could be long in terms of weeks. They could be long in terms of months. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this, and they give you like huge examples on here. This one is heavily politically motivated, I believe, in their major example here, because they're talking about things like raids on border towns, to refugees fleeing, to missives coming through and orders coming down, all the way down to invasions becoming all-out war in the area that you're in. So this is really like good ways to use countdowns to make your worlds alive.
I guarantee you someone has already has taken Majora's Mask, and there is a moon about to crash into the world. Yeah. And you have to figure out how to prevent that, and whether it's a time mechanic or what. You could make a really fun like game based on just that.
Yeah.
And I mean, what a way to kick off a campaign.
Yeah. And I think the thing to hammer home about this entire section with countdowns is that they can be as grandiose or as minimal as necessary to push a narrative or to make a scene more dynamic. Because it could be something as simple as in, we are waiting for all-out war to rage across the land, versus you have 3 turns before more guards show up.
Yeah. Right.
And it could be something that simple. Mm-hmm. Countdowns have so many uses, and there's a lot of really good guidance in here on how to implement those countdowns and ideas on how you can do it, because it might not just be every turn with fear. It could be something even more dynamic with that.
You could have a player that died in a combat, and then next game that player comes back. They're naked. They come from the woods, and you've got a countdown die. And they can't explain how they're back or anything like that. Well, on the other side, they made a deal with the deity, and they've got 3 days to resolve the, unsettled conflicts or whatever.
Yeah.
And every long rest, you're taking that die.
Taking the die.
So there's so much you could do with this. I'm glad they like doubled down on this too, because while it is, something you could do in any game like this, the fact that they spend 3 whole pages just really getting the point across and showing you how each kind of die and what the situation, like you mentioned, how grandiose it could be and how small, anything could, I like it.
Yep. The next section is gold, equipment, and loot. So this one is pretty straightforward. It's just how you are going to be distributing things like gold and distributing equipment and distributing loot and the economy of your world.
Yeah.
Basically, best practices for getting stuff to your players.
How to hand it out, when to hand it out.
Yeah.
How much to hand out.
And a lot of this goes back to things like tier 2. So like when you're looking at you're going to want to look at the tier equipment. So if your characters are just recently in tier 2, so they've just leveled up, but they're all still in tier 1 equipment, it's generally a good idea to start getting them into tier 2 equipment sooner than later, because they're going to start getting into encounters that are going to be even harder for them if they're not in tier 2 equipment. And then as you go up through those tiers, you kind of have to look at these systems to figure out if you're distributing stuff fast enough and well enough to be able to keep your players, one, engaged, because everybody loves getting new loot.
Totally.
And then also giving them a fighting chance, because if they're not upgrading their equipment, maybe they're not as advanced as they could be, and they're going to struggle more in combat.
It'd be easy to forget this. You're like, well, the players leveled up.
Yeah, they leveled up. I mean,
should be okay. But if the balance of the encounter is expecting your players to be properly equipped for the tier of combat that they are now in, maybe they're not doing as great as you thought, and you might get that reminder halfway through a session. Oh, they might not win this. And you look down at their character sheets and realize they're like,
you haven't given them any loot,
starter equipment in their fifth level. And you're like,
yeah. And while gold might not be, as in depth as far as I have 7 gold pieces and 3 copper and whatever many silvers, distributing gold is also still important.
Your players are going to want it.
Because your players are going to want gold.
They want something. And it's easy.
Yeah. And they're going to want it. They're going to, want to flaunt it. They're going to want to use it. If you never give your players gold and then you put them in a social situation and they're all like, this guy's susceptible to bribery. And they look at you and they're like, you've never given us any money. No job has ever paid us. And how do we bribe anybody?
And it could be as simple as you don't, and the cool thing here is that you don't have to be like, oh, you took out, this group of this bandit camp, right? Well, you pick this guy's pockets and he's got 3 gold and 2 silver on him and 4 copper. Well, this other guy, he's got 3 copper. You just, you search the camp and you put together, you get about 2 handfuls of gold.
Yeah, it's really simple, just to make sure that you're distributing stuff in a timely fashion and making sure that your players are equipped. There's also a little blurb in here about the economy of your world that also gives you some good ideas of average costs of things.
Yep.
So not down to the coin level. We're talking about a luxury room in a fancy hotel being 1 bag of gold. So there's a couple, examples here. So just making sure that you're keeping your players equipped properly.
What's funny is when you're reading this, I thought you were reading the standard in, and I was like, it's only a handful. And it doesn't say luxury.
We're talking about
and then I went down approximately rooms. 1 line.
I'm like, it's standard in with a pile of hay in the corner for a bed.
Like, you just completely skipped over. You're like,
nope.
I would never.
We're staying in the fancy room.
Yeah. We got running GM NPCs here, just telling you basically how you're gonna want to set up their stat blocks and how you're gonna reference them and consider their difficulties and things like that. Using NPC allies, it's the same thing but in reverse. Instead of harming the players, it is gonna help the players. Not that the regular NPCs have to harm your players. Mine just tend to. So. It's just guidance on how to handle NPCs, which, at the end of the day, aren't all adversaries and everyone else in the world other than the player an NPC of sorts? Yeah. So read through that if you're ever going to have NPCs in your game, which you're going to. Then you got NPC features. This is some examples. Here's one. It's called Not on My Watch. Trigger. A PC within very close range marks at least 2 hit points. If that happens, an effect. Roll 1d8. On a 4 or higher, this NPC moves within melee range of the PC and marks one of the hit points instead. So they can walk in and they can take a hit for the player. Once you okay, goodness. Once you must reduce the die below 1d4, this feature cannot be used again. Okay. I skipped over half the sentence, and that's why it was confusing me. When you do it, you have to reduce a die size. Once you've reduced the die size to a certain size, you can't do it.
Then you
whatever.
can't do it. Yeah.
Yes. God, my brain. I was like, why doesn't this sentence make any sense? It's because I skipped half the sentence, and I thought I was right. I wasn't. Remember how we mentioned admitting that you're wrong? Whoops. I can't words well. Another one, the NPC might have thing is Arcane Hold. Choice. When the battle begins, choose a favored PC. Trigger. The first time during a battle, the favored PC is within close range and hit with a target. Effect. Make an attack roll with a +6 modifier against the adversary. On success, the target is temporarily restrained, which means they can take actions but can't move, by tendrils, by powerful magic. Yeah, that's another one. So that's an NPC is part of the battle, but they're actually actively making a choice at the start of it by choosing one of the players. Mm-hmm. So it's things like that. They give some additional NPC examples and stuff like that. Of course, there's going to be stat blocks for some of this in the book. Other ones you're just going to make up, which is totally fine.
Yep.
Especially if you do prep some of this stuff in advance, you can add in some of these features and already have them like worded well in your head. Make sure there's balances you can, conceivably get them before game night. A lot of this stuff, you're just going to be like, you know what? I have an ability that does this thing, and you just make sure there's a trigger for it and make sure you're consistent with, the effect. You also have some other optional GM mechanics. You have fate rolls, where you narrate a scene. In these situations, you're going to ask for a fate roll. You're going to have them basically roll one of their dice. It's not going to roll grant hope or fear or anything like that.
Nope.
It's just the only reason they would even choose like hope or fear is just for flavor.
Yeah, it's all for flavor.
Yeah.
And it's just for fun. Like a good example that they show there is like rolling a fear die and saying if your roll is a 4 or lower, the fire spreads to the rest of the house.
Right.
Which is a great way to use fate rolling, I think.
Yes. I think we use this as a luck check a lot of the times in D&D.
Exactly.
Where we'll roll a d20 and sometimes we'll have you call even or odds, or if it's below an 11, something bad will happen, or whatever.
There's just a more fun way.
It's things you can throw in. Yes. Will we do these? Yes. Am I going to call them a luck check? Yes.
I think fate sounds cooler.
I'm stuck in my ways. Maybe you. I'll have you roll fate rolls, and then everyone else is going to be like, "How come we never roll fate rolls?" I'm like, because he's not lucky. Falling and collision damage. Oh boy, people get really upset about their falling damage, so pay attention. If a character falls to the ground, you can use the following as a guide to determine the damage they take. A fall from very close range deals 1d10 plus 3 physical damage. A fall from close range, so now we're talking 30 feet, deals 1d100 plus 15 physical damage. Oh wait, I skipped. No,
that's
1d20 plus 5. See, I can't read.
Far, very far.
There we go.
That one hurts.
That one's 1d100 plus 15 or death.
Yeah.
I love that it could be 16 damage.
Yeah. Or squished.
Or
pancake.
Dunzo. If a character collides with an object or another character at a dangerous speed, they take 1d20 plus 5 direct physical damage. So if Richard the Seraph is flying at a speed of 50 miles an hour and a giant orc is also traveling at a speed of 50 miles an hour at an opposite direction.
Who gets there first?
It doesn't matter. They both take 1d20 plus 5 direct physical damage. You'd think it'd be more, but it's not. You can always increase or decrease the damage dice to fit the story. Yeah, maybe it's more.
Maybe it's more.
You're both going 50 miles an hour, so I would double it. 2d20 plus 10. moving and fighting underwater. It's funny that this is an optional mechanic because I just assumed this should be a normal mechanic, but guess what? It's optional. It's
optional.
Just be normal underwater, I guess. Hey, granted, if you have swim speed, you're probably normal.
You're probably fine.
This is that if you're underwater, your attack roll is going to have disadvantage. If you can't breathe underwater,
come up with a countdown.
You're going to have a countdown for how long, you can basically hold your breath and stuff. If you take an action, maybe they could take it down. If they take damage or roll with fear, maybe it ticks down. Either way, whenever that countdown ends, the PC is going to start marking stress every time they take an action. So at that point, remember, moving is an action.
Yes.
So if you got to get out, it's an instant stress. But optional, so feel free to reflavor this however you want. Granted, tabletop game, reflavor anything however you want.
Yeah.
But, at least they have something here. And then you have conflict between PCs. This is always that thing where you're going to say, guys, don't do this. And it's also always going to happen. It's just, a matter of whether your players can keep it between the characters.
Yeah.
Or if they bring it home with them. We've experienced this before where we had a player get genuinely upset with another player and they brought it home for like months. And we didn't know it was as bad as it was. And it's to the point where, the player actually apologized to us years later because they realized, that they were holding on to anger for a long time for something that really should have just been a moment in the story that everyone went home and was like, wow, crazy that happened. But, not to that player. So if it ever does get to that point, don't hide it. Bring it up to the players. Bring it up to the GM. If you just want to talk to one person, bring it up to your GM. GMs, be respectful. Hear them out. Don't call them crazy. Just let feelings be feelings, and resolve things. Speaking of resolving things, if combat does happen in the game, they have, some guides for that. They say rolls might not be necessary to reach an outcome. Talk to the players, and if they think they can just figure it out in a story, narrate what happens, great, go for it. Obviously, one person's not going to be like, "Well, I kill him," and the other person be like, "Yeah, that's fair."
That's fair. It's tough but fair.
Tough but fair. But if basically what they suggest is on an attack roll against a PC, attacker rolls against the defender's evasion, just like an adversary would. On any kind of action roll, the instigator makes an action roll and the target makes a reaction roll. To succeed, the instigator must beat a difficulty equal to the total value of the reaction roll. So if I do something to you, Richard, you would roll a reaction roll. You're setting the DC.
Yes.
And then I'm rolling an action roll, which means I can add experiences and things like that to try to beat your DC.
Mm-hmm.
Attacks are just attacks against evasion. So easy enough.
Yep.
I don't have any issue with either of those.
Nope. It's all pretty straightforward.
Yep.
The next section that we have is our session 0 and safety tools, which we kind of talked about earlier. So this is the section about laying the groundwork for what your game is going to be and how you're going to present it to your players and what you're expecting. Mm-hmm. And this thing is split up with a system that is known as the CATS method, which is concept, aim, tone, and subject. So this is just different things that you're going to discuss with your players before you're actually getting really into the game, starting with the concept, which is generally straightforward, talking about the concept of the game that you're going to be playing.
Yeah.
So that everybody's on the same page. The aim is what you aim to accomplish with this game. Like, what kind of game is it going to be? Are you going for, an emotional storyline? Is this something that's going to be just a fun, good, silly time? Are we trying to, showcase growth and involvement in stories, that kind of a thing?
Are you really putting this on because you want to spend time with your friends for a few hours a week?
What's the aim here?
Yes.
Tone is just that. What kind of tone are we going for? Is this like dramatic? Is this adventure? Is this silly? Is it political? Just trying to figure out that everybody knows if this is a silly game, it's a funny, silly time, that it's going to be a funny, silly time. We're not going to talk about politics.
Goofy and scary. You mean Scooby's back?
Hey, that's a good thing for some people.
Right.
And then finally, you have subject, which is just the kind of subject matter that's going to be in the game. So everybody knows what to expect as far as subject matter is considered. And then the final thing that they close this out with is lines and veils and the X card. So lines and veils are things that are hard lines that people don't want to see in a game.
Don't bring this up.
Don't bring this up. Don't talk about it. I don't want it in the game.
Yeah.
And then veils are things that may exist in the world, but aren't at forefront. Yes. So they're not something that is constantly coming up in the game. Everybody acknowledges it exists in the world, but it's not something that you encounter on a daily basis in the thing.
Terrible people do terrible things. This terrible thing happens because of terrible people.
Mean it has to happen,
but it doesn't happen to us.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then the X card is just that. It doesn't have to be a physical card. It can be anything, but it could actually be a physical card that you slam down on the table and be all like veto, X. veto, which, or it could just be somebody making an X thing or saying hard pass.
I just laughed to myself about the veils because I imagine, and I guarantee, I'm not trying to say that your fear is not valid. It's just funny to me because spiders are icky. But if someone's like, veils, spiders, they can exist, but I don't ever want to see a spider. I don't ever
want to see a spider.
I'm like, you know what?
I know that they're in the room with me. You said there were cobwebs. I don't want to see any spiders alive. Don't you dare tell me I hear a skittering noise. I'm going to throw down an X card. X.
Right.
So yeah, these are all important things that are good in a session 0 to kind of like get things jumped off. Mm-hmm. Other things that you want to talk about in a session 0 is asking questions. So asking questions of your players and letting your players ask you questions too. So it's not just a one-way street.
Yeah.
Asking questions helps you figure out what your players want out of a game and where you want to take a game that you might be running for them.
Mm-hmm.
Finding campaign inspiration could be anything. This could be something that comes from character backgrounds or those questions that we talked about before. They could inspire the campaign to go in different ways. Inspiration can come from all kinds of things, least as much being session 0.
Yeah, it could be session 0, things you get from the players. It could be outside influences. It could be television or books you've read, things like that.
Yeah.
Anything should be fair game. And honestly, there's going to be one of those situations where I mentioned Majora's Mask. If you're going to run Majora's Mask the game and you're heavily influenced, hey guys,
be
a little upfront or whatever if you need to be. But, it doesn't mean you're going to show, you don't have to show all your cards.
Yeah. And then they actually give you a breakdown of example session 0s.
Yep.
So this is like a legitimate 100% breakdown where they talk about beforehand how you're going to talk to people. Player introductions should take 5 to 10 minutes.
Yep.
Take a break. Like go grab a cup of coffee, whatever it may be. There's a lot of breaks in here, which is funny to me because I know our group would not take any of these breaks.
We might get one.
No, yeah, maybe one break, and that's because somebody got a text. Most of this we're just going to sit through, and we are going to beast mode this entire thing. No stops, no breaks.
Yeah,
it's speed. If you slow down, the bus explodes. But this is, a good breakdown.
Explodes.
Yes. Unless
guys, if we stop rolling dice, this room will explode.
My veil is bombs exist, but I don't want to hear about them. But yeah, no, this is a good breakdown of an actual session 0. Like everything you should be covering before you get into your real session, which is our next section.
Hey, running a session. So this is a section about guidance for preparing and running a session of Daggerheart. Thinking in beats. Basically, storytelling beats are moments that change the trajectory of the narrative. So it's that in action, in combat. Like how we mentioned how if you take a swing at one guy and an enemy dodges it this way and then something else comes in, or one guy goes down but another big guy comes in, or if you're in the social setting and you overhear that the advisor to the king is planning to bring him down. These are all little beats that can move the narrative forward in one way or another. You also have larger scale planning and stuff this would be stuff like the enemy faction getting ready to come into town. How did you even hear about that? Do you have informants? How are you seeing propaganda and stuff? Have you run across any of the villages maybe they've already gone through? Have you fought or interrogated any of the people from their faction? You want to set everything up when you're getting ready for this. Like, what has the party already done? What do you think they're going to get to? And then when they don't get to those and they do other things, be ready to kind of just like move a little bit. I definitely always try to plan things with narrative beats for sure.
Yeah.
I look at them like milestones, and I know that my players may not get to all of them today, but they might get to them next game. And if they get to them in different orders, maybe that changes things. Maybe it doesn't. Either way, I usually have a rough idea of how a game might go based on these narrative beats. Preparing combat encounters. This is one I am terrible at doing. It's because we change, everything changes all the time. But in Daggerheart, especially since it's a newer system for us, I'm gonna have to start doing it all over again, and because I'm not gonna be able to pull enemies out of my butt for a little while. Well, we'll see. And it's just my editor brain was like, do I need to bleep butt? But with the balancing and everything, especially when you're not used to the system, it's a good idea to go through and make sure that when you're building out the encounter, that the adversaries you're planning on, facing your PCs is of adequate difficulty. And you're gonna, it's the mathy answer there is, like you don't want to be too easy because then the combat's not interesting, and you don't want to be too hard because your party's gonna die. And yes, you can do a little bit of fine tuning mid combat if necessary, to bring the stat blocks or health or whatever up or down if you made an oopsie. But if you spend a little bit of time preparing your combat in advance, it's going to help you out a bunch there. They bring up battles and narrative. Like I mentioned, the story is going to move forward in combat. A lot of time, narrative leads to combats. It can be the climactic moment of the entire session. It can be the climactic moment of the entire campaign. So just always be ready to use these battles, even smaller ones, to try to move the story forward whenever possible. What are the motives of the adversaries that are there? Even if it's a small thing like the bandits, right? Like, how are they? You don't have to tell me who their family is, and they're just trying to make a living to support their daughter back home, like living with his brother. But especially if it's a smaller group like that, maybe they're working for a bigger leader. Maybe they've got they were paid by someone to come out here and watch this area. Everyone has a reason for doing what they're doing. And as long as you have a base idea of what that is going into it, just be ready to shape it a little bit, depending on what questions your players might throw at them and stuff too. Have a dynamic environment. Be ready to call down that thunderstorm. Be ready to have some trees fall. If your players want to jump on a chandelier and ride it from the ceiling, crashing on like a group of gobos' heads, go for it. Flight and other features. When you're building out your battles, make sure you're taking into account different abilities your players have. You can fly at level 1 if you're a certain ancestry or class. You can your players can have a very wide set of different abilities and features and stuff like that, and just be ready, account for those things. If you have nothing but enemies with melee weapons because you forgot 2 of the PCs could fly, well, you're at a disadvantage. Maybe they have hand crossbows in their backpacks, but that's something you're gonna have to make up on the fly, or figure out if or another, maybe they escape from the combat when they realize that they weren't prepared for that, and they try to lure the PCs into a smaller area where they can't take advantage of their flight, kind of funnel them into a hallway or something.
Yep.
We also have some examples of battle narratives, just talking about setting up what the narrative here is, gives you some adversary motivations, and explains some things that may happen in the environment.
Yeah, basically, this is exactly everything that you just discussed, but what they do here is an example scenario about a druid grove. And they go through and they showcase every single one of those bullet points, as in, this is what this would look like in this scenario.
Mm-hmm. So, cool art. I love the tree guy.
Yeah.
Sitting there, just enjoying his day. There's a cloud to his left that looks like it's smiling. Fun days. But just even more, they realized, I think, in this book that they had an amount of leeway when it came to these chapter sizes, right? And with the rules of Daggerheart being simpler than some other systems, they really had the opportunity to expand upon explaining and giving examples for basically every rule that they give you.
Mm-hmm.
So while the players, it's a little more concise with here's how to build a character, and here's gear and things like that, and a couple examples here and there of how to actually play the game. GMs, it really is like a 60-30 split of 60-40, I guess. That math's out better of of telling you how they suggest doing something, and then just straight up giving you examples.
Yep.
Session rewards. It's all about different kind. Well, it's rewards you get for the session.
Yeah.
Crafting scenes.
Yeah. Whatever.
Consumables, equipment. It could be information gathered that they needed or didn't know they needed. Something new they've learned. Especially if you're trying to tier them up to the appropriate level.
Yeah.
Crafting scenes. This is just that. This is painting a word picture.
Yep. Painting your word pictures.
Sharing the spotlight. It's you and the players. Don't hog it for yourself. Let them fill out some scenes. Let them talk. Let them speak. Let them narratively build up environments and stuff every once in a while too. Like, especially if it's like you're one of your PCs like put on the map in session 0, like the town they came from. Well, maybe they explain what their town looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they introduce you to the blacksmith that you need to get some new gear from. They tell you what he looks like and what his name is. Introduce, let the players have as much freedom with some of this stuff, and let them speak.
Yep.
let them play the game. Tie together story elements. Big on this one. Always try to take anything from your players, build it into the world every time you can. You're not going to get all of it. Sometimes it's just too much, especially when narrative is moving forward at the rapid pace it does sometimes. But just try to do it as often as you can, because it makes your players feel so connected. And the more connected they feel, the more invested they are into your story. And then they care about what you're saying and aren't just tuning you out. So it's just a cool little cycle of you feed off each other.
Yep.
You take what they say and
everybody's working together.
Exactly. Engage quiet players. This is one of the things we have been a little concerned about with the whole free flow combat system of maybe the quieter players don't take as many moves, don't do as many actions because they don't want to speak up. Well, that's where you as the GM have to be aware of that. And you have to ask them like, oh, okay, cool. While he's doing that, Kristen, what do you think you'd be doing right now? Oh, this goblin just came in. He tried to take a swipe at you, but it bounced right off your shield. What do you do next? And try to pitch it to them. And maybe they're like, oh, I just kind of, I step back. Sure. It's don't feel like you have to force a player to do something. Maybe if they really don't do anything for a couple of games, talk to them outside the game and see if there's like a hold up. Maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe this isn't what they thought it was going to be. And at that point, you could give them an easy out, if they don't want to play anymore, or ask them if there's anything you would like. Maybe they want you to give them some options.
Yeah.
And that helps them lead them in to start making their own choices at some point. But it's good to at least ask and talk to them. Use visual aids. If you need to break out a sheet of paper and draw what environment looks like, and maybe you're not going full on battle map. Maybe you are. Maybe you're using trackers and stuff and let letting it your players see exactly how much time they have left on something. This is even like putting your fear tokens on top of the board. Anything to let players quickly
visually see what's happening.
Yes, exactly. Encourage unguided play is their next thing here. Sometimes you've really focused in on a scene or a battle or a social encounter or something, and you just want to take a seat back and let your players just completely take control for a little bit. And, you pass them the reins. What do you guys want to do? And they kind of tell you, and then you can just feed them little bits of information where they need it. But other than that, you just kind of let them take the reins, especially if it's like a shopping episode or whatever, like we really want to gear up. Awesome. Where do you guys, what are you guys going to do? Where do you want to go? And, what are you looking to buy? Like, just let them do what they need to do. If they want to sit down by the campfire and have some conversations, those are my favorite moments. You literally just sit there and listen.
And just listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next section is all about using conflict. So this is kind of a broader one, which covers a lot of things that we've already talked about. But there's basically different types of conflict in the game, obviously, and this just kind of guides you on how to use them. The first one being social conflict. So this is non-combat oriented stuff. So this is social things that are happening. Mm-hmm. This could be either political things. It could just be, your reputation in a town with people, the guards, the nobles, or even just the normal people that live in the countryside. Yeah. So conflict doesn't always have to be combat, and that's where the social thing comes in. There's also some good examples in here on how to use countdowns in social conflict.
It's always a countdown.
Always using countdowns. To be able to, see how you're dealing with that, how you're influencing the NPCs in an area, whether or not their patience with you is wearing thin, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of good guidelines for social. And then it moves directly into armed conflict. This is, what you traditionally think of as your conflict.
Yeah.
This is you getting physical and making sure that your combat isn't just combat for combat's sake. Mm-hmm. So there's good examples on here about having goals in combat. And inserting goals in combat to where it's not just goal is kill, right? So that's not necessarily going to be the end game of everything. It could be different things. You could have adversaries that are going after your players to steal something that they have.
Yeah.
To get an artifact from them, to split them up so that they can, corner one of your players to get information out of them or kidnap them or whatever it may be. So the goal doesn't always have to be kill the players. It can also be other things like steal from the players.
Yeah. Kill them later.
Or push them to a location.
Yeah. True.
They also talk about using your fear for drama. So using the fear that you have stored to add drama into these fights. And that could be something as simple as, your players are on a streak of just hitting and doing really, really good, but you have fear and you turn the tides. Mm-hmm. And make the combat more dramatic now. And that could be everything from changing the battlefield, which is the next part, which is phases. So it could be changing the battlefield completely, like moving the terms of engagement in a way that shifts the battlefield. And it could be changing the foes, like we talked about earlier, when you have transformations. You might have an enemy that goes down too fast and the combat now feels a little bit lackluster. Well, maybe he doesn't go down. Maybe he rouses himself up and moves into an extra boss phase. Yeah. A rage takes over and now he's, even stronger and has a little bit more health, or he changes physically or supernaturally to keep things interesting.
Stands up, picks up his severed head, and uses it as a bludgeoning weapon.
Uses it as a bludgeoning weapon. Yeah. There's all different kinds of things you can do to keep conflict dynamic and not just samey. I attack you, you attack me. One of us dies, it's over.
Mm-hmm. Here we got using downtime. which is all about some of the stuff. It's the doubling down on some of the stuff we just read from the player section. Talking about different projects during downtime. Definitely want to work with your players to see if that's something they want to do. Telling you how many ticks they suggest. If you're doing like a D12 on a countdown for downtime, they're trying to work on like a new weapon. A crit is going to be 4 ticks, or Sex with Hope is 3. A failure is still going to give them a tick. You're not going to like gain, they're going to gain hope and you're going to gain fear off something like this. It's like a reaction roll to just see what kind of progress happens. GM downtime, which is what's most important for us here, is on every time they short rest, you're going to gain a D4 of fear. On a long rest, you're gaining fear for every PC and a D4 of fear. You also advance any of your long-term countdowns.
Yep.
Something you might have, it could be a moon coming in or something like that.
Days passing.
Yeah. If you're doing extended downtime, multiple days or longer, you don't need to worry about having them do different scenes and stuff for every single downtime. If you have what's the word I'm looking for? Countdowns and stuff like that. If it's multiple days, maybe you are going to tick down multiple times. Mm-hmm. If you're, gaining fear, you're looking at you're going to gain your 1d6 fear per PC. So if I've got 4 players, I'm going to roll 4d6 for this extended downtime and come out of that downtime with all that fear built up. Because, hey, the world is still moving.
Yep, everything is still going.
We're also going to go into character death. We've already mentioned the choices the players could do, but this is just advice on how to handle some of this stuff, right? Like when the players choose to avoid death and they're going to, choose to maybe get a scar, they're going to go unconscious, they're going to risk it all, or the blaze of glory. And it's just advice on how to handle some of these things. For example, Blaze of Glory. If a player decides that this is how they're going to go, work with them to ensure that the one big action they take is meaningful. And then, narrate their passing on to the afterlife, or maybe give them those last few words with their allies. We also have a section here for when disaster looms. This is something you're going to encounter, especially... potentially encounter, especially when you're new and you're like, I'm sure we'll run into this if we're new at balancing encounters, and maybe we're gonna goof here and there. It's gonna be too easy. It's gonna be too hard. Hopefully we don't. But I'm not expecting it.
Yeah.
And it's just it's about learning from the mistake. If you need to try to pitch a what sort of lifesaver to your ally, to your players, maybe an ally comes in, or there's divine intervention or something to try to stop a total TPK, or maybe if they all go down, they wake up and they're in some sort of prison cell.
Yeah, they're tied up somewhere.
They're tied up on a small island. As the pirate lord is sailing away, there's a powder keg with a 20-foot fuse, and it's working its way across, and you got a little countdown timer. There's all the kinds of things you can do, and to try to like mitigate or get away from the one maybe unexpected but balanced well, TPK, or maybe accidental TPK. Mm-hmm. So things happen, but maybe you have a table who just is like, okay, we accept the fate. And if that's the case, that's okay. Work with your players.
Yeah. How do you move forward from it?
See if they want to continue the campaign and move, have new characters. Maybe time passes and some new adventures rise up and they're trying to accomplish, what these other ones had, been trying to. Either way, you can have an open discussion, figure out how you want to move forward. If one character passes, you need to introduce a new character. Awesome. Is this someone that is going to be vital to the story? Is going to have important information, or maybe an object or something they need? Is this someone that's just going to come in as opposing the enemy faction, and they just come in at the right time and kind of fill the void in the party? Or there's different ways to bring in a character. It's just more advice on how to do that. Leveling the party. It's every couple of sessions or so, you might want to do it. If it's a short campaign, they recommend every other session. A longer one, maybe it has to do with milestones and things that happen, like big story moments. Maybe you get these big level ups at the end of the session. And, you'd sit there together, level up everyone together, and then send your friends home for the night and then meet them again whenever the heck you play again.
Yep. Sometimes it can just be vibes based.
Yeah, totally. Then something here, I'm not going to read through all the way, but they have a section for running a one-shot. And they have... I'll get through it. They have prologue, adventure, and GM prep. The prologue, it's our story takes place within the kingdom of, and then they have little preset names consisting of like Atharia, Belsong, Helmrin, and a couple others. And you look to a player and be like, which one of these? Or like, okay, we're currently traveling through, and you pitch some names over to another player.
Yeah, this is basically Mad Libs.
Yes,
is what this is.
But making
this is
one
shot Mad Libs. You can either come up with names on your own, or you can use the ones that they have there. They're numbered, which means you could even roll it if you wanted to. So this is just a quick way to build a one shot completely randomly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the individual names aren't numbered, but...
Well, I mean, yeah, but you could like 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Well, 1, 2, 3, and 4 go to 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the block. But yeah, the GM prep I like here, where they're like, send your players on a break.
Yeah,
and then fill this out
and fill this part out.
Yeah. So this is something I thought would be really, really fun to actually probably try one day and just get everyone together for literally like a one night, like, hey, let's just try this out.
Yeah,
and see how it goes.
And just see how it goes.
And I bet you have a fun time just throwing this together for nothing. Oh, this would be a good one if we go to like Gen Con or something again.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because it'd be really easy to just start one.
Literally,
like
right?
Everything is just right there. It probably takes you like maybe 10 minutes to fill that all out.
Yeah.
And then you have a setting.
Exactly. Running a campaign. They, of course, they suggest maybe using one of their campaign frames. We'll get to them later in the book, but they include a few campaign frames in Chapter 5, including the Witherwild, 5 Banners Burning, Beast Feast, Age of Umbra, which if you watch Critical Role, I'm sure you're familiar with at this point, Motherboard, and Colossus of the Drylands, which I'm very excited for Richard Run for us. These are all awesome. These are all really cool. I can't wait to talk about these with you guys. This is rad. I don't blame them for being like, hey, choose one of these, because one, they put in the effort.
Oh yeah, because the effort's there. And the world
is
built.
Really good, and it's so much more than I was expecting.
Yeah.
When we were going through some of the stuff in the beta, they go over building a map. They've got some pre-done maps for some of the frameworks. They also have entirely blank maps for filling out from scratch, like with your friends, and hey, each of you like name a place, and you build out the map together, and just filling out a world map. Yeah. It's super cool. Filling space and leaving blanks. Yes, you're not going to want to fill this out all the way, because guess what? You need some room to just improvise. You're an explorer and fill some stuff out as you go. Incorporating player backstories. You're going to build this into your world. If you are, from a pirate escape, from a pirate ship, well, there's probably a pretty active like coastal region.
Yeah.
You have pirates exist in your world. You've got, things like you just build your characters in. It's the same thing as earlier. The more your characters are built into the world, the more
connected.
They just feel like an actual role to play in this world, and they feel like their choices matter. And if their choices matter before the game even started, you're off to a great start.
Yeah.
They also have tying backstories together. They give you some more advice on that, because that can be really fun. That's a lot of times I feel like that's not necessarily going to come from the GM. You do have situations like we did with Strahd, where you all ended up at the same school, and we did like a session 0 mini session sort of thing, where you all got to know each other before the game really started. So you had your backstory of sorts get a little tied together before you were like full fledgling like adventurers. But a lot of times you're gonna have players come up to you and be like, we're siblings, or we're best friends from the grotto.
Friends, whatever it may be. And then it makes it really easy to tie them together, because they've already done the legwork for you.
Exactly. We've also got planning a story arc here. This is that thing we mentioned beats and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is that on a grand scale,
on a much grander scale.
Yes. Yeah. Your you're figuring out exactly what's going to happen, or what like should be the climax. What's the main objective you want your players to accomplish between now and end of arc? Is it going to be that at the end of this, there's going to be a dinner with the devil, and between now and then, they have like 15 objectives they could do, but they're not going to have time to do them all. And which ones are they going to choose? And how's that going to affect the story? And then are we going to have a big climactic fight right before this objective that they're going to have where they meet the devil finally? And you know what? You don't have to plan past that. If this is like the arc they are in, and the only way to escape it would be to entirely ignore it, fair enough. You know? But they give you they run you through this in acts. So in Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and it's how things are going to happen, and they break that down in beats. Act 2 is complications that happen, and Act 3 is the culmination of everything.
Yeah.
Yet again, them going out of their way to just explain something and then just elaborate on it for like 2 whole pages.
Yeah, it's interesting because this section is the written form of something that a lot of games already do. Right? So it makes it sound way more complicated than it actually is. Because the way they present it, and they eventually show you at the end of this what looks like almost an Excel spreadsheet that shows you all 3 acts, and then 3 story beats within Act 1, 4 within Act 2, and 4 within Act 3, and then how you would have like a subplot A, subplot B, subplot C, and then where they fall in the beats within the arcs, within the acts.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, it makes it sound like running a long form story is incredibly complicated.
It looks crazy
complicated, but it's really not. And a lot of people do it naturally in long form campaigns without even realizing it, because it's as simple as saying, you know, like in Act 1, you know, we have a small story beat where somebody is trying to find their lost sister. But by the end of Act 3, we find out that the sister was never lost. They were working with the big bad this entire time. And that is an example of a subplot A spanning over 3 acts and disappearing somewhere in Act 2. Because it was important in Act 1 for, you know, like a couple of beats. But then in Act 2, other things were happening. And then in Act 3, that beat comes back and we reference it again. So it makes it look way more complicated than it actually is. I think this could be intimidating to a lot of first-time GMs. So I say approach this section with caution. Don't freak out when you look at this, because it's easy to freak out when you look at this because they make it look hard. It's not that hard.
It's funny because I'm sure to some people you're like, oh, this makes more sense now. Like when it's written out on like a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
You're like, okay. In Act 2, we're going to hit on these points at this time. Okay, this makes way more. Me, I look at this and it's just words on a page. And I'm like, bleh.
So it's funny because I look at this and the Excel spreadsheet makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So like if you look back,
I would be so lost.
So like Monster of the Week, we have a campaign that's gone a couple of episodes, and we had one of those episodes was a weekend that was happening, right? I had a 3-part arc for the entire weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And if you look at my sheet, my Excel spreadsheet for this, it's written exactly like this, except each one of those arcs is a day. So it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
I just got actual chills. Look, it just bumps my arms.
There were subplots of everything happening on each one of those days. So it was like a microcosm of this whole thing, but just in a weekend span.
Yeah.
And I had that all typed up. Whether or not you guys did any of those things was completely up to you. Those things still happened.
Yeah.
All those things were happening in the background, and then some of them you interacted with and some of them you didn't. So to me, when I looked at this, it made perfect sense, because this is exactly how I formatted a one-shot that was just taking place over the course of one weekend.
I could never.
But then expanded upon, to be a possibly a year-long campaign, or even longer in some people's cases. We have people that have, are playing games that have gone on for 10 years.
Yeah. It's just so much easier for me to just cram all this into a corner of my brain.
Yeah, but I can see how it could be, like I said, daunting for some people, which is why I say don't read this and freak out. Read this and think about it in a more practical sense.
Sure.
It's just guidance to help you come up with a way to make a long-term campaign feel cohesive and include all the things that you want to include, be it player backstories or, overarching complex complex things that happen.
Totally feel free to use something like this to help you organize ahead of time. But however, as always, be ready for everything to flip.
Yeah.
At a moment's notice.
And just make it up as you go. If your players are having fun, they're having fun. If they're not, they'll probably tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to the end of chapter 3.
We cannot get these down less than like an hour and a half, can we?
No, absolutely not. It's our fault for babbling.
Whew.
So yeah, that was chapter 3.
Yeah, it was. This was a chapter in the book for me where I understand it was incredibly useful information.
Mm-hmm.
I was so excited for this chapter. I was like, I can't wait to learn all these new rules I don't know. I can't wait to do this. And it was just doubling down on all the things if you've been reading books.
Yes, yeah. This was really just hammering home the options that you have. Less about real mechanics and more about application.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Dude, I could easily recommend this book to someone that's never played a TTRPG before.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, my first RPG, easy peasy.
You'll be
Daggerheart. You'll be 100%. Yeah. So it's honestly, it's funny to say because the D&D starter set is generally like they're pretty good. I think I might recommend this over like that, and that's an actual starter set.
We're getting there. Our book review is coming up. We only got a few chapters left.
Well, I'll get there at some point. But that's a little bit of ways. If you found this also super boring. I'm kidding. If you enjoyed this at all or anything like that, hey, guess what? Your positive affirmations, keep those landing in there lit a little bit longer, week to week. Just, we're crawling by. If you're on Spotify, those places like that, Apple Podcasts, 5 stars appreciated. YouTube, like and subscribe if you don't mind. You'd be Richard's best friend. But for now, everyone, until next time, I've been Tyler.
And I've been Richard.
And we've been True Strike. See ya!
See you around.
Hey, adventurers. Thanks again for joining us today. Please be sure to give us a follow on your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. If there's any questions you'd like to write into the show, you can hit us up on Threads, Blue Sky, or Instagram. New episodes release every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for listening to True Strike.